Welcome to Rant Mode. Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine War Update Extra video where I'm just going to have a little delve into Colonel McGregor, who many people see as an appeaser, a shield for Putin and for Russia, and presenting the Russian narrative as he does. I have done a previous video on one of his articles that's on my Tippling Philosopher channel. You can check it out there. It is Ukraine War Update Extra, debunking Colonel McGregor's nonsense. I looked at that one particular article he wrote and sort of found it really terrible. So took that to task. This is going to be taking to task something. Well, I don't know how long I'm going to get into this because let's face it, this is a 52-minute video. I'm probably going to get, I imagine I'm going to get sort of 10 minutes in and go, I can't do any more of this. It's doing my nutting. We'll see how far I go. I just want to react to him because he's one of these big names that people present who are anti-Ukraine war and anti-Ukraine and arguably pro-Russia, or at least anti-war. And they present Scott Ritter, they present Douglas MacGregor as people who are, serious names in bringing really great arguments to support this aggressive NATO expansionism and all the problems with Ukraine and how terrible Ukraine are and how wonderful Putin is and how great the Russian army is. So we'll see whether he does any kind of Putin's awesome type stuff here. I don't know. I suppose I better give you a tiny little bit of an intro into Colonel McGregor again. I'm just going to dip into Wikipedia because it's easy and it's basically a bit of biography. I love it when people go, "Oh my god, you're using Wikipedia as a form of blah blah blah." I don't know how it's used. Like, go and check the sources. If you've got a problem with the Wikipedia, you've got a problem with all encyclopedias, because this has been shown to be no more or no less accurate than any other encyclopedia. So go and do one. Anyway, he's a retired U.S. Army colonel, former government official, author, consultant, TV commentator. He played a significant role in the battlefield in the Gulf War and 1999 NATO bombing of Yugoslavia. And after he left the military in 2004, he became politically active. In 2020, President Trump proposed him as ambassador to Germany, but the nomination was blocked. And then the Pentagon spokesperson announced that he had been hired to serve as senior advisor to the acting Secretary of Defense, a post he held for less than 3 months. Trump also appointed him to the board of the West Point Academy, his alma mater. These appointments caused controversy due to his past racist comments, and that's sourced by CNN there. He regularly contributes to Fox News and Russian state media. Okay. Where his opinions on Russia and Ukraine have caused controversy. Liz Cheney has called him a member of the Putin wing of the GOP and a fellow traveler. So that's a kind of just a brief look at who he is. A former military person who is casting his opinions on the war in Ukraine. Right. Let's see where this goes. I have listened to the first minute of this and had serious issues within the first minute or minute and a half or something. So yeah,
public is certainly beginning to discover that we're at high risk of a confrontation and ultimately a state of war that we don't want. I think more important, though, is that the truth of the Ukrainian effort falling apart and crumbling is actually seeping through and finding its way into the Western media.
Okay, so straight away saying that the Ukrainian effort is crumbling. When was this recorded? This is 1 month ago. So this is after they have been given a whole bunch of equipment. I wonder if you'd still think they're crumbling now, given there's 60,000 people training abroad or in various places, and they're just about to get upwards of 1,000 pieces of equipment that is, or pretty much, or most of it, if not all of it, is, well, most of it is more technologically advanced and has a competitive advantage over the equipment it will be facing. So it's crumbling. Why do you think it's crumbling?
There are now articles seeping through in Germany France. As far as I know, nothing yet really in Great Britain.
Mm-hmm.
But here, telling us, this is not some grand march to victory. Ukraine probably can't win, and we should.
So Ukraine probably can't win. So that he's saying that there are articles seeping through in some places saying Ukraine can't win. Yeah. So is he going to cherry pick like one article out of 50 and say that one is representative? I mean, that's a really big problem. That's a hasty generalization, all sorts of fallacies going on there. But that's not to say that it's not an argumentum ad populum, which is to say that the more something is claimed, the more likely it is to be true. That's not the case. However, if you're seeing the odd article saying that Ukraine are not going to go, there's not going to be an easy win, they might struggle to win, and then say this represents that Ukraine aren't going to win and they're crumbling, can you not see the problem there? There's some serious cherry picking going on. But also, I'd be interested to see whether those articles are at their base sourced in Russian propaganda. And in fact, what are those sources that are presenting that? Is it Tucker Carlson, right? Is it so on and so forth? That needs to be analysed. This is there's an awful lot of legwork that a couple of these articles are doing for Colonel McGregor here.
Should understand that because we've had statements by Secretary of Defense Austin that effectively said that.
This is what I had a problem with, and I stopped listening after I listened to this. So he's going to say Secretary Austin, who's the defense secretary in the US, is basically saying it's all crumbling for Ukraine and they can't win. So if we go back, what was the claim? It's that they can't win, isn't it?
He told us by win, and we not some grand march to victory. Ukraine probably can't win.
Ukraine probably can't win. Also, note probably there. I don't want to be too anal here, but probably is there's a lot of legwork going on with that because then he's talking about crumbling because some articles say they probably can't win. So it's not that they can't win; they probably can't win. So there's an area of there's a modality there that you can argue about.
Should understand that because we've had statements by Secretary of Defense Austin that effectively said that.
That effectively said that again. Oh, it's, on the second time listening to this, there are loads of issues with language here. It effectively said they probably can't win. Okay, what did Lloyd Austin say that effectively said they probably can't win?
He told the donor conference, look, we don't have much time. Either we get this stuff, or it may be too late.
Either we get this stuff, or it may be too late. They got that stuff, by the way. They've got loads of stuff. Or it may be too late. That's not saying they probably can't win. So, just in philosophy, like words are really important, and the way you set out your arguments are really important. They had to be watertight, and if they're not watertight, if you're in a debate, you would just get destroyed. And this guy is butchering language here, or he's making really big claims, but they are built on modalities and probabilities and possibilities. And the thing is, they get compounded. If you add a possibility onto a possibility onto a possibility, you end up with your eventual conclusion is that. So if you got like there's a 90% chance of that happening, and then on top of that there's a 50% chance of that happening, and then on top of that there's a 75% chance of that happening, blah blah blah. It's not like you can take the biggest possibility then and say that's the chance of that happening. Actually, it's a percentage of a percentage of a percentage, which means there's like a 2% chance of that being true at the end if those are compounded probabilities. It gets a bit technical here, but the point is that if your conclusion is built on a whole load of unsubstantiated probabilities, then what you're saying doesn't really amount to much. Anyway, he's I keep interrupting myself. So he's talking about, this is how much problem I have with what he's saying. He's talking about Lloyd Austin saying that Ukraine probably can't win. Let's just go back again.
Look, we don't have much time. Either we get this stuff, or it may be too late.
And remember, Lloyd Austin's going to be wanting to be really persuasive in his public statements to make sure that people do give the stuff. It's like scare people. If we don't do it now, it's going to be too late. Right? That doesn't actually mean that if that doesn't come, it actually will be too late. It's like, I'm trying to freak you out. Okay, it didn't happen. Okay, we'll try the next Ramstein meeting or whatever.
What do they mean by too late? I don't understand what they're saying.
So, by the way, so that's it. So Lloyd Austin did not say Ukraine probably can't win. He did not say that. So therefore, I would accuse him either of lying or being really, really disingenuous.
The winter war with
And I'm angry now.
the hundreds of thousands or more Russian troops is about to be initiated, correct?
Yeah, I think we're going to see that happen here shortly.
Okay. So the waters have frozen over. We've been waiting for the armored divisions to move. Obviously, if Ukraine knows.
This is fascinating because now we've had a month. This is probably a good time to listen to this because we've had a month since he said this, and he's going to make loads of claims. Oh, we're going to see all this armor. We're going to see 100,000 troops. What have we seen? We haven't seen that. So again, arguably, he's wrong.
That they have until the spring to save themselves from a Russian blitzkrieg. The Russians must
so it's the
know
Ukrainians.
As well.
The Russian approach to this thing, and a lot of us have been trying to understand the Russians from the beginning. I didn't understand Putin's initial approach, as we've discussed in the past. I didn't appreciate the extent to which he was trying to avoid unnecessary damage and civilian casualties, and how he
Whoa! Oh my god, I've got shivers down my arms, but like holy cow! What did he just say? I can't know.
He was trying to avoid unnecessary damage and civilian casualties, and how he genuinely believed that he was going to find a negotiating partner to end this thing.
We're 2 minutes in. I don't think I need to give Colonel Douglas MacGregor any more of my time. That's absolute BS. 71,500 odd war crimes later, and he's got command over that. And you're telling me those hundreds of cruise missiles that swamped Ukraine for the first year of the conflict, from the beginning, you're telling... Oh, God, this annoys me.
He was trying to avoid unnecessary damage and civilian casualties, and how which he was initial approach, as we've discussed in the past.
Initial approach.
I didn't appreciate the extent to which he was trying to avoid unnecessary damage and civilian casualties.
That's right from the beginning, he said.
He genuinely believed that he was going to find a negotiating partner to end this thing. He finally abandoned that in the...
Absolute BS. He was planning to go into Kyiv and to assassinate Zelensky and to uproot the government and replace it with a puppet government. Absolute BS. I'm calling him out here. BS.
Summer set out to build this enormous force, which is now poised to attack. And what we're now beginning...
What enormous force poised to attack?
To sense is that instead of a massive assault from all three sides simultaneously, it looks like they're going to begin moving in the south, then incrementally from the west, or excuse me, from the east, and then finally from the north. And what this amounts to is a deliberate, methodical conquest of what remains of eastern Ukraine. They're going to move up, capture the Donbass, destroy what's left of the Ukrainians there, then move further north as additional forces pour into the east. Once the east is secure, I think they'll cross the Dnieper River, and then we'll begin to see forces from the north begin to move south.
I almost feel sorry for him. Like, I don't know how you can be this wrong. So he's claiming that, I mean, this was over a month ago now. He's claiming the Russians are going to move in from the south. So what happened at Vuhledar? They got absolutely spanked. They're going to move in from the east, and they're going to move in from the north, and then eventually they're going to cross the Dnieper River. Dnieper River's here. So they're going to get here. I assume he means pretty promptly. I'm sorry, Mr. McGregor, Colonel McGregor, but the Russians are barely taking Bakhmut, which is the same place they were barely taking 1 month ago when you gave this talk. Nothing has changed. A couple of kilometers around Kremina have been taken. Hranikivka by Kupiansk. Literally a couple of villages. Dubrova, southwest of Kremina. And the villages north of Bakhmut. I mean, in simple terms, how do I say this? Oh yeah, you're completely wrong. Let's go and see what his predictions were.
Forces pour into the east.
Let's go back. Sorry, I know this is probably painful for you, but we'll probably only do 5 to 10 minutes.
Donbass, destroy what's left of the Ukrainians there, then move
Yeah.
further north as additional forces pour into the east. Once the east is secure, I think they'll cross the Dnieper River, and then we'll begin to see forces from the north begin to move south, and then the Russian forces will move across the river and link up with them. In other words,
What does he think? There's Genghis Khan with a Mongol horde here. Were these hundreds of thousands of Russian troops just with all this equipment that can just flood this area in the way that he seems to be indicating?
Instead of the, historic lightning fast Nazi-like approach, you're getting this very deliberate Russian approach, and I think there's an important reason for it. I think the Russians, and now specifically we need to talk about President Putin and his inner circle, don't want to precipitate a wider war with the West. And I think their assumption is if we move systematically and methodically, we'll still win this thing, but we will not inadvertently provoke anyone in Washington or anywhere else to do something stupid like intervene in this mess and widen the war, which clearly the Russians do not want.
Now,
I mean, there may be some sense in that. It's also the long game, isn't it? That Russia wants the West to get bored, to run out of patience. So yeah, you could see some Russian out there.
Mr. Zelensky said Ukraine needed U.S.-made ATACMS missiles with a range of 300 kilometers.
ATACMS, yeah, these are this is a form of the HIMARS missiles, same product from Raytheon, but it reaches out to 200 miles. And again, this is back to the discussion, well, we have to hurt the Russians or the Russians won't listen, which is nonsense. You hurt the Russians, they're going to double down and clobber you much.
So he's suggesting that if you're going to go to war with the Russians, you can't hurt them because they might get angry and double down. So basically what he's saying is you can't win against the Russians. So, but I mean, he's framing this whole discussion ridiculously. It's like, yeah, we can't give them these things because they will cause the Russians too much pain and they might double down, and this might go on for longer. And then, heaven forfend, the Ukrainians might win. Of course, that's not in his narrative. That's not one of his conclusions. So he's like, oh, you can't give them ATACMS because, Jesus.
Worse than you're already receiving. I think we're almost at the end of this. I don't think Zelensky really believes that he's going to get more than a fraction of what he and his generals want.
I would just check out the last month. I'd check out Leopards, JDAMs now appearing on the battlefield. Look at the couple of battalions of modern tanks, some of the best tanks in the world. You've got hundreds and hundreds of IFVs and APCs and MRAPs and all these other letters, vehicles that are decent. You've got other tanks as well, refurbished T-72s. You've got the Polish tanks, the Twerdys, all sorts of other bits of kit being, delivered to Ukraine. He's just wrong again. He's just wrong again.
The casualty counts are mounting. The situation inside the country.
Substantiation. Of course, the casualty counts are mounting. This is a war. They're going to go up necessarily over time. They can't go down, right? Unless, resurrection's a thing. Don't get me started. So they will go up. But what do you mean by going up? Do you mean that Ukraine are losing more than Russia? What's your position on ratios and how are you substantiating those figures?
Want the casualty counts are mounting. The situation inside the country is terrible. It's not just the.
Why do you think the situation inside the country is terrible? It's because they've been invaded by the second greatest army in the world, supposedly, and a narcissistic psychopath. That's why it's terrible in the country. Don't go and cast your it's terrible in Ukraine. God, Ukraine should just give up. It's terrible in Ukraine because they've been invaded. That's like saying World War II, Hitler invades Poland, France, whatever country you want to pick, and go, God, it's terrible in France. God, we better give Hitler exactly what he wants. God, who want that terribleness to happen in France? Bloody Hitler's fault. You're just appeasing the aggressor here.
The collapse of energy. But now they have these press gangs, trying to drag people in. And the latest
one, substantiation. Although there has been claims of that, and I will agree, there has been some press ganging of people in Ukraine, and that has been called out by fellow Ukrainians, and they have put an investigation into that, I think, and are seeking to stop that, especially since they also have more volunteers than they need. So they don't need to do that. So that was why people have been calling that into question. But he needs to establish that is representative of what is going on across Ukraine, that is a widespread problem and not something amplified by Russians. And then he also needs to see what's happening in Russia, where you've got forced mobilization. Where you need to look at the torrents of videos coming out of Mobits complaining they don't have squat, of Wagner assassinating their own troops for not running forward into almost certain death, or not wanting to do X, Y, and Z. He's cherry picking one side and using that as again hasty generalization, and using that as representative of everything that's happening in Ukraine, and forgetting anything to do with Russia here. He's like, he is single-mindedly intent on downplaying Ukraine's chances, abilities, equipment. He's downplaying and he's amplifying all the bad things in Ukraine, and just making an absolute hash of evaluating the entire situation accurately.
Tactic is to order a pizza in Kiev, and when the boy shows up to deliver the pizza, you capture him and put him in uniform and take him away.
Is that what's going on over there?
Yeah, I mean, it's reached the point of absurdity. They've gone into all the way to the west, to the Carpathian Mountains, where you have several 100,000 Hungarians who, thanks to Woodrow Wilson and other stupid people, were left inside Ukraine as a result of the post-World War I settlement. And they're now forcing them at gunpoint into the Ukrainian army to march 400 or 500 miles east.
We never hear about the press gangs here.
You probably never hear about it because it's not happening to the extent that he is implying. Hundreds of thousands. He's saying, this is interesting use of language again. There are hundreds of thousands of Hungarians in the Carpathian region. Yeah. And then he puts that together with press ganging. And what the brain does is then go, 100,000 people are being press ganged into the army. It's like, no. Loads of things here that are just incredibly dubious. And as well, he's not substantiating those claims, and he's not showing that they are representative. That's like saying, do you know what? Someone got murdered in Portsmouth last week, a city near where I live. Someone got murdered in Portsmouth last week. Oh my God, Britain, everyone's getting murdered. It's terrible. Oh my God, I wouldn't live in Britain. It's just murder capital of the universe. You need to get things in perspective. You don't present this perspective and present the problems or the data you're claiming in a full context, then you are misleading people.
Here in America. Now, there's a sensitive issue here. I don't know if you know this gentleman, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis.
Yes, Danny and I know each other well. He's really a first-rate soldier. He was an artilleryman at the time, did a great job. And he is honest as the day is long, as they say.
Well, he's certainly coming out straight up about what's going on. He ran an interview on Breitbart today, warning about the chance of a nuclear war, meaning if we do put, as you've said on this broadcast and elsewhere for a long while, if we push Putin into a corner, he's going to launch nukes.
So this may well be the case, right? But if you just go on that logic, Putin can do anything he wants in the world. He can waltz into any country in the world, attack it like Article 5 aside of the NATO, walk into any country in the world and do what he likes, and then go, if you do anything back to me, I'm going to press a nuclear button. And everyone has to sit there and go, oh, well, that's all right then. We'll just let you do what you like. It's just it's just appeasing the bully here. As if there's no comeback because he's got nuclear. And because he's got nuclear, it gives him the justification to do what the hell he likes, wherever he likes, whenever he likes. Just, this is so unnuanced. It's so simplistic. It drives me nuts, as you can see.
He will never yield.
No, of course not. And there's no reason why he would. This is very important to him. Again, as we've talked about it.
Oh, well, that's all right then. It's important to Putin. Oh, it's important to Putin. Oh, let's let him go into Ukraine, shall we? Oh, it's important to him. Oh, he likes that, doesn't he? He likes 71,500 war crimes, doesn't he? We'll let him go in there. He's got nuclear missiles, does he? Well, we better let him go in there. You do what you like, Vlad. You do what you like in Ukraine. It's all right by me, because do you know what? You're not concerned with killing civilians. We've seen this from the start, haven't we? And you really want to sit down and negotiate. We've definitely seen that from the start. And you know, it wasn't like you were actually invading another country in the first place. Oh no, and no doubt it was someone else's fault, nothing to do with you, Vlad. You had to do it, didn't you? And oh well, yeah, no, absolutely no. This, I am genuinely angry that someone can be platformed to spread this abject BS.
In the past, this would be analogous to a foreign power like China or Russia or someone else standing up a 600,000 or 700,000 man army in northern Mexico to invade and destroy the United States. We wouldn't stop until the army was gone. He's not going to stop until that threat is gone.
So, in other words, the more we punish Russia militarily.
So this is all about, he's invaded Ukraine because Ukraine was a direct threat to Russia, and he's not going to stop until Ukraine is obliterated. And he's fine with that. He's like, yeah, that's understandable.
The higher the chances are him having to launch some tactical nuclear weapons.
Except, Doctor, I would tell you that Russia is not being punished militarily. This is the other aspect of the big lie that's being told. When General Zaluzhny was in the United States, the commander of Ukrainian forces, he met with Secretary of Defense Austin, and presumably also with General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. There are sources now saying that privately he told them that 257,000 Ukrainians have died since the beginning of this war. Now,
let me read you. Wait, 257,000?
Yes, Ukrainians from all walks of life, not just military, but civilians.
Okay.
We have no way of knowing that, but it's not unrealistic. This war does not resemble what we saw in the Second World War, doesn't resemble Vietnam. This thing really resembles the last sort of year of World War I. And remember that during the First World War, American forces on the ground in France only fought for 110 days. People don't realize that. We only fought for 110 days in 1918. And in that time frame, we sustained 318,000 casualties in the United States Army. And of that number, 110,000 were killed. Now, if we look at those numbers right now, 110,000 men killed in 110 days, that compares with what you're seeing today in Ukraine. And remember that 75% of the casualties that the Ukrainians have suffered to this point, wounded or killed, have come from artillery systems, rockets, missiles, and hard shell explosive artillery rounds. That's very much like World War I. So we're seeing that kind of attrition battle, except that the Russians have allowed the Ukrainians to impale themselves on this.
Listen to the language, right? First of all, he's not mentioned anything to do with Russian deaths. This is all about Ukrainian deaths. So he's framing this entirely one-sidedly. And then he's saying the Ukrainians are impaling themselves on the Russian artillery, which is completely abrogating moral responsibility from the aggressors here. He's implying that it's the Ukrainians' fault for defending their own country. They're impaling themselves on Russian artillery. I despise Colonel McGregor, or at least what he's saying here. This is morally abhorrent in my book. What he said, he is justifying Putin's outright aggression on a sovereign nation in a way that I find troubling.
And have overmatched them dramatically. There are 10 guns for every one Ukrainian gun. The Russians can fire 60,000 rounds a day.
But where are the fools in our government? Where are they coming up with the idea that this small country without an air force can defeat a major thermonuclear power? Where did they come up with that idea?
I think it stems from the initial phase of the operation when Putin went in. Remember, if you go back and look at the mainstream media, all the so-called experts were saying, oh, no, the Russians will never intervene in Ukraine. That would be destructive. They would lose so much as a result. They're not foolish. They'll never do that. Well, that's all nonsense. They did. Their economy has not suffered. Has it had some setbacks? Yes, but ultimately their economy has thrived.
Again, this is complete BS. So the mainstream media at the time were actually saying that Ukraine are going to get their asses kicked within 3 days. I mean, that was the general thoughts at the time. So that's incorrect. And I mean, that did change around when actually Ukrainians put up some resistance. And the idea that Russian economy is thriving, I mean, literally, they just announced a $34 billion deficit for January and February, like 2 months, $34 billion deficit. Again, absolute BS. He's lying. He's literally, I mean, he's either lying or he's utterly deluded and ignorant, with all due respect. This is really like.
If you look at all the key exports that they're involved in, agrarian, gas, oil, minerals, you name it, they're doing a land office business all over the world. China and India have rapidly replaced Europe and the United States. So that hasn't happened.
They haven't replaced it, and they're buying it cheaper, and they're buying less of it. So again, that is not correct.
But I think
they've admitted themselves, the Russians, that they've got a big, massive decline in their gas and oil sales.
The initial attempt by Putin to move cautiously into the country in anticipation of negotiating, and they mistook that for weakness. They mistook it for incompetence. Remember, whenever we go anywhere, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan or anybody else, we treat the enemy or the opponent as though it were Germany or Japan in 1944. The Russians didn't do that because they weren't interested in the kind of destruction that has ensued. So we assume.
I'm going to leave it here. They weren't interested in the kind of destruction that's ensued. Syria, Grozny, Chechnya, Georgia, Syria, take your pick. Mariinka, Mariupol. No. So 10 minutes. I lasted 10 minutes. I cannot do any more. And sorry, this has been half an hour of me just look. I don't have much more hair to pull out. I don't know what more I can say. I think people who really sing the praises of people like Scott Ritter and Colonel McGregor are simply people that want that conclusion to be true and are not so they hear a bunch of stuff and they're absolutely not critical. So I'm going to listen to that, and I'm just going to those claims I'm just going to assume they're absolutely correct. I'm going to go wherever these guys go, because actually I know what the conclusion is already, because that's why I'm on board. And it's just confirmation bias. So you just lap this stuff up because you think, oh, it's amazing. Here's someone that sounds confident and he sounds erudite and he's a military person. But there's got to be a reason why there's only like 2 or 3 of these guys. and again, like, I don't want to get, I know some of you are going to be climate science deniers and whatnot, but it's a bit like climate science. Like, you can listen to the 3% and base your entire, worldview and knowledge on that. Fair enough. But it's probably worth listening to the 97% experts as a consensus, because, you know, there's a greater chance that they're going to know what they're talking about. And here you will have a select few people who will be bucking the trend. They might be shills, they might be in a pocket, they might be getting some kickback somewhere. I don't know. I don't want to cast too many aspersions. Or they're contrarian, or they've got an axe to grind with their government, with NATO, with whoever. And so, or all of the above. And so they end up maybe themselves getting sucked into this narrative, or pumping out this narrative because it meets their agenda or whatever. But if you're really interested in truth, I mean, you should do this with all sources. You should do it with me when you listen to me. It's like, question everything I say. I mean, it gets exhausting, doesn't it? Questioning everything. You can see this half an hour and for 10 minutes. It's the bullshit asymmetry, isn't it? Brandolini's law, which is it takes vastly much more effort to unpick people's BS than it does to state it in the first place. So, yeah, it's just if you want to be sucked into this, it's easy to be sucked into this. And there are places on the internet where you can go and you can listen to Scott Ritten, you can listen to Colonel McGregor until the cows come home, and you can be happy in your anti-Ukraine, anti-West, anti-NATO stance, and you can think Putin is some pure angel of a human being, that all he wants is to negotiate, wasn't interested in civilian deaths and blah blah blah. And you can kind of forget his entire life story, and you can kind of forget Grozny, and you can kind of forget the Skripals and Litvinenko, and you can kind of forget Navalny, and you can kind of forget all the people that have been falling out of windows accidentally, and you can kind of forget every single terrible bit of geopolitical nightmare that Putin's been involved in, that should give you some understanding that, hey, you might not be justified in believing what you are claiming here. I'm starting to rant again. That's enough from me. That's enough from him. That's my opinion. Feel free to disagree. Comments in the threads below. Thank you, and take care. Speak soon.